Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we're talking about the TV show Midnight Mass and all the questions it raises about ethics, theology, justification, and what does it mean to believe that you are helping people while doing so much harm. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew. I'm your host. I am joined today by the granddaddy Panda-isimo as we call him, Matthew Carroll, head of the Stranded Panda Network and the MCU cast, the person who inspired me to podcast, and particularly appropriate for this particular podcast, son of a preacher man. Matt, how are we doing today?
Well, I was good, and I've been called Papa Panda. That has been the case. No one's ever called. I don't think anyone's ever called me Granddaddy Panda, and I guess I'm offended. I don't know. I'm hurt.
I don't mean granddaddy like grandpa. I guess this is a southern versus northern thing, because granddaddy to me doesn't. It means like the Panda-isimo, like the head daddy in charge. You know.
Well, down here it means the father of my father,
okay.
Which just makes me old. I realize we're doing video chat right now, which often we just do audio, and you can see the gray.
Yeah.
But like it's offensive.
As a northerner, I would have called you Grandpa Panda if that's what I meant. We'll stick with Panda-isimo. But anyway, yeah. So let's just dive right in, because I don't have you for too long. Midnight Mass, for those who haven't seen it, is a Mike Flanagan Netflix show. This is the creator of Haunting of Hill House and Haunting of Bly Manor. And once again, this is a story that is using the genre of horror to tell a story that's really about... I mean, this is really Mike Flanagan as a former Catholic working out his issues about religion and Catholicism and forgiveness and retribution and redemption and theology, and just all wrapped up in what is, we're going to get right into spoilers, a vampire story for all intents and purposes. Now, what was your overall take on this show?
I thought it was so inventive and so much fun.
Yeah.
And well, fun and really serious.
An odd word, but
I mean, it's such a, like, as a person who grew up incredibly religious, hearing all of those scriptures that they're actually like quoting from the Bible to justify their vampirism was a lot of fun. Yeah. And it's just like it's basically like, it's like Bible fan fiction almost. Like it's you've heard of the, like, see this makes me want to do it. You've heard of like Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, and you've got like
Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies.
Yeah, like I want to see the Bible and vampires now. Like that's what this is like. This is if angels were vampires. Like that's what this is. But that's not what's actually going on. That's just the way they're justifying it to themselves. And I thought that was an incredible look into something that I think is incredibly important when you look at any religion. And that is, if your religion, this is a new concept for me. This is something I've decided recently, my line for when religion has become useless. And that's not mine to say, but I can say it. And that is when your religion crosses your empathy.
Yeah.
And that's that. Like when your religion decide your religion is more important than empathy. And it's funny because I grew up, one of my favorite books growing up that was my apologetics book to go to was Mere Christianity. Apologetics, by the way,
for those who don't know, it's a way of sort of defending religion, specifically often Christianity, against the critiques of a secular world, etc.
Right. Like it's basically there are these books you will read as in the Christian culture when you have doubts almost. Like you read these books and like, I'm having doubts. I turn to this book, and one of the most comforting for me was always Mere Christianity, which is a book that starts with the idea that where everyone has a little small voice telling them what is right and wrong. And then it expounds on that concept until it sort of does this work around proof for God. Like if we all have this moral voice in us, what does that mean?
Right.
And like it sort of expounds on that. But it's interesting because I've now come to the place in my life where I've like, basically I'm no longer religious. And when that little small voice, when your religion crosses that Rubicon where you're no longer listening to it.
Yeah.
Then you've crossed a line. Like, and a lot of these people, I mean, particularly his assistant, who I'm going to forget all the names of the characters. I'm going to pull it up.
Beverly.
Bev. Okay. Yeah. Bev, it has clearly, she crossed that line long ago.
Yeah.
You know, She has no empathy for animals because the Bible says we're the creatures are our domain or whatever. Like she's justifying a lot of things before this movie even starts.
Yeah. Let me jump in also for a second, just to give a quick summary of the plot for those of you who haven't seen it. And again, this isn't, we might at some point do this show on PandaVision, especially if there's a second season, though there's no reason for there to be a second season. But this is just to explore the questions, but just to let you know. So the main idea of the story is it's set on an island that's like a small town that's literally separated from everything else. Mm-hmm. We're not told where. It's probably in New England somewhere, like kind of a fishing village that's dying. The economy's dying. The town is dying. The church is dying. And the Monsignor of the church went away on a trip to Jerusalem when he was very old, pretty senile. He wandered out into the desert, and he wound up, as he understands it, wandering into this temple, being attacked by, as he understands it, an angel. The angel drank his blood and then made him drink the angel's blood, which restored him to youth. And so, like, in our minds, we think of this as vampirism, obviously. The word vampire is never used in the story, but it's pretty clear that's the idea of it.
And they also have things like they can't go into the light.
Yeah, they can't go into the light.
Like all those vampire things are present.
Yeah, all that's present. But the thing, what happens is, though clearly it has a healing aspect to it, while also doing things like you can't go into the light, it increases your anger, it increases your, all this kind of stuff. And so he comes to believe that this was, like, going into a lot of the theological ideas of blood and blood being healing, that this is kind of the literal idea of that blood of Christ being passed down. And so he wants to come back to the town and teach them all that miracles are still true. And he pretends to be someone new, but over time, he makes a girl who's in a wheelchair be able to walk again. He helps other people become younger and healthier, and with the eventual goal of, in his mind, converting everyone into vampires, or as he understands it, angels, so that basically he thinks like the second coming of Christ is here, and that he can do. And I think the show makes pretty clear that he has fundamentally good intentions, even though that he's the person who's often kind of wrapped up in it. As it goes along, though, but he's also obviously very, very, like, he's not willing to see the harm he's doing to people. Other people get involved. They have their own agendas. They want to spread it more. It becomes kind of the classic vampire story of, the people who are fighting against it, the people who are fighting for it, and till eventually, by the end, his plans...
But it falls on weirdly religious lines. It's like all of the people in the town that are Christians that have been taking the sacrament or taking the Eucharist every week.
Right.
They're the ones, they end up... being vampires, and all of the atheists in town end up being like, what is going on? All the Christians are eating people.
Yeah, exactly. and it plays out in wonderful ways. And so the point of it all is that it winds up being a story about the danger of religion, especially, I think, as you perfectly put it, to overcome your empathy. That when religion starts to be a way for you to say, these are the good people, these are the bad people, and so any amount of terrible things are justified towards bad people, as long as it's for this, overall good goal, and that the good people be saved.
Right.
So yeah. So it's, and then also tied into it is some amazing character studies and other discussions of redemption. One of our main characters is someone who, a guy named Riley, in the very first scene of the show, kills a young woman in a drunk driving accident. And the show starts with him being released from jail, coming back to town at a time when he really hates himself and he thinks he has no place in society, and a lot of society doesn't know where to put him. So
the first few episodes, you mentioned it's a horror show mixed with these religious elements. The first few episodes, the only real elements of horror, there's some like clues that something's going on, like some dead animals and things, but like the only real horror element is he keeps seeing flashes of the girl he killed lying in the road, and it's this really uncanny valley thing because she had glass all in her face, and the blue and red lights were flashing on the glass.
Right.
And so that's how he's remembering her. But it's weird because she'll show up in places and it has this very uncanny feeling because the blue and red lights aren't hitting anything else in the room.
Right.
They're just hitting off her. So it almost makes her look like this sparkling blue and red visage. And it's really creepy, and he can't stop seeing it, and it's his guilt chasing him.
And it's kind of a wonderful like meta filmmaking, TV making technique, because in Mike Flanagan's earlier pieces, they were both ghost stories, really. Like, and again, where it's the horror is a vehicle by which to tell a story that's mostly about something else. But in both cases, he used ghosts quite often. So especially if you've seen a Mike Flanagan piece before, I spent the first couple episodes thinking that the ghost of this girl is haunting the main character, until finally realized, no, that's actually just him remembering it, which I just thought was like a brilliant little TV thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I kind of got that it was just the, but I didn't know what the show was about. See, and I almost feel like we should probably add to the top of this episode a spoiler alert, because we should do a 2-minute section on what the show is without spoiling the vampire thing, because that's the big reveal, you know?
Right.
Like, I had no idea what this show was about. Could be ghosts, could be this, and I'm watching it, and then finally, when the vampire's revealed, I was like, oh, it's like end of episode 3. I was just blown away by how, and then you start really, episode 3 is where it really picks up, and you get these justifications that are, like, I've talked about this many times on different podcasts, but everybody talks about show don't tell.
Right.
Well, I love freaking telling. I love when a character just exposits the heck out of a scene and like tells me what is going on. And what's amazing about this show is they will straight up let this priest, who is a vampire and kind of knows it, kind of doesn't, believes he's the beginning of the new covenant.
Right.
You know, the Bible is separated into 2 covenants. It's the Old Testament covenant of blood, and the New Testament is the covenant of Christ or whatever.
Right.
And he believes this is the beginning of the new covenant.
Right.
And it's just really well done. So it will straight up zero in on him having long sermons. He will give an entire sermon, and you kind of know what he's talking about, but the audience still thinks he's just talking about Christ, but he's trying to prep them. He's grooming his audience to be more accepting of his vampirism when he finally reveals it.
Yeah.
And it's so good, man. And then there's also AA meetings where him and this guy who killed his girlfriend, Riley and the priest will sit and have these long AA meetings where it's just the 2 of them talking, and they're just having an AA meeting and it's long monologues. And I just love it because they are having these deep, philosophical conversations about morality and religion under the backdrop of this vampirism that this guy is trying to groom everyone to understand, but not in an evil way. He really does think he's helping everyone.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the most beautiful and pernicious and terrifying parts of this whole story, because I will add a spoiler warning at the beginning, but yet part of why I don't think this is a vampire story. I think this is a story about religion and faith, where the vampirism is just like the MacGuffin, the thing that drives the story, because it's not about the ethics of vampires. It's about, it could be anything that was something that does harm, but also on the surface seems to have a good thing. And I think for me, one of the things that I am a former clergy person. I've spoken to a lot of clergy people, both of all religions, both former and current, about this show. And one thing that all of them talked about, and that resonated for me as well, was that this isn't a 25-year-old clergy person who is, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and thinks they're going to go out and save the world.
Right.
This is someone who is at the end of their life, at the end of their career. They probably should have retired a while ago. But they think that they are the moral center, the spiritual center of this community. And they've spent 80 years, 70 years, however long it is, trying to bring life to this community, and it's dying. And that there's such a sense of, I think Keeping the Faith is one of my favorite movies because it also gets into this, but a lot of things talk about this, where working as a clergy person, whatever you're feeling about the ethics of clergy, and I certainly think there's an awful lot of terrible clergy people out there, but I think some very good ones. But
nope, all bad. Nothing but bad people.
That's fair.
I'm joking.
Martin Luther King might have some arguments against you, but also he had some problems as well. Malcolm, etc. I think there's some good ones, but I know you're kidding. But the point being, there's a feeling of loneliness, of especially I think if you're not the sort of clergy person who I always used to joke that I'm sometimes jealous of those on the right because of the confidence that throwing away all reason and logic can get you. I think it's incredibly dangerous, but that's the point, is that to be an actual person of faith, to be a clergy person, is to be constantly doubting, is to be constantly wondering, am I doing the right thing? Am I helping? And I feel like this is a character who spent 80 years, 70, 60 years, whatever it is, I'm theology, not math, trying to help.
Right.
Everything around him is dying and failing and fading. And now he gets this chance to actually heal that little girl in his community who can't walk because of this tragic thing that happened with this awful drunk person with a weapon, to bring back life, to reconnect with the love of his life that he wasn't able to be with because of the Catholic vows. And it's not to justify it, but I feel like if you've spent 70 years, 60 years, whatever it is, feeling like you're trying to help and you don't have any of the answers, and then along comes this that is so clear and right and black and white, this will make things better, just ignore the other stuff. I get why that's so seductive to him, and I think that's one of the most troubling pieces of the whole show, is that how relatable that is,
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've got the character of Bev, who we spoke about earlier, who is clearly just out for her own good, her own pride, but she wouldn't say that, she wouldn't say that aloud. I can't imagine there's not something in her mind. She long ago gave up empathy and is just grasping onto this new form of the religion as another way of excluding other people.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
Making herself feel one of the chosen.
Yeah, and it's funny, again, speaking to clergy people, I've said every one of them I know has said they've had a Bev in their church at some point, or their synagogue, or of whatever gender. It doesn't have to be a woman, but that person for whom they want to be seen as being the most holy, the most righteous, the most sacred, the best Jew, the best Christian, the best Wiccan or Druid or Muslim or whatever it is.
Right.
And then be able to kind of look down on everyone else. And that's...
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think Paul Hill, or the Monsignor Pruitt, he knows that. He knows just how terrible this person is, but he's willing to use her because he thinks that's the tool he has to use, because she believes it entirely.
Right. Well, it's also, here's the thing. I think there is a lot in him that is doubtful. Because he's lived this life where he wasn't really sure of his vows, because he had a daughter with someone in town. He kept it a secret. It's not like he came out and was honest. Like, he's lived this life of secrecy and doubt, and like as you said, to be a clergyman is always that, because there's no proof. So you live your life preaching a thing that you can't know is true at the heart of it. And so like he's lived that life of doubt. And so his turn is not one of like, I've been justifying myself to these people all these years, and now I finally get to justify more. That's Bev. He is, I finally have proof.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's him turning and going like, it's all true. Guys, it's all true. Like, this is all real. Like, he really is buying in even harder than he ever has before, I think. And I mean, we don't really get to know him beforehand, but like that, because of the sort of sins of his past and the doubts we get to hear him talk about. I almost never rewatch things. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
But this is a show I really would like to go and revisit, because I want to hear his sermons again now that I know so much about him. Because you don't, the vampire reveal is one thing, but then a little later down the road, you find out he had a daughter. And I mean, that's like the last episode you find that out. And like, oh man, you were trying to save this town, but a lot of that was like, you really cared about this daughter you never got to know.
Yeah. And in some ways I didn't love that plot point, because I felt like I liked the idea that he was the person who genuinely wanted to help, felt like he'd failed at it the whole time, and then now had this way to do it. And so making it be more about his own urges, his own desire to kind of go back and be able to relive his life with the woman he loved and with this daughter they had. It takes away a little, but you're right. It also is a very powerful thing, because again, it's more to his loneliness and to his like, how can the thing that I think is doing good is telling me to deny that which I know that is good, which is love. And I mean, in that, like, I've heard that story echoed by certainly by priests or others who are not allowed to be with people, but also just by, anyone who, because of divorce or because of their sexuality or their gender, like the thing that they, especially in Christianity, like where we are taught that God is love, the place that they find love is also what the church tells them is so wrong, And so, yeah, I think that's such a great. I struggled with it, but it is such an important part of a story. I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just that he had two lives that he doubted.
Right.
You know what I mean? And what, I love that. I love that moment too, because like she isn't on board.
Yeah.
She was never on board. Like this whole, when she realizes what's going on, the woman that he loved, like that's a whole really beautiful part of the story, is that this woman that he loved has had dementia for 10 years and she's lost herself completely. And he starts going to her house to give her communion.
Right.
And that slowly heals her, and she basically gets younger and younger and younger. And then by the end of the story, she's as young as he is, and they're both young. And it's just like he starts talking to her about, now we have a second chance. Like, I can take this collar off this time and we can have a second chance, because he's regretting the decisions he's made. And I love, there's a line where she's like, no, but that's not how it happened.
Yeah.
And like, I made a different choice. Like, and it's sort of revealed that like she did not choose to be with him. Right. You know what I mean? It's not like, it wasn't just his choice to not be with her. It was, she didn't choose to try to get him to leave the faith. She wanted to be with her husband and her daughter.
Right. And I think that's a big part of it. The other thing, though, that I think is also so important is she also says, like, Paul, this isn't you. That not Paul. I forget. It's Monsignor Pruitt. I think John was his first name. Because, and I think it's exactly that. I think she talks about how one thing she loved about him was his empathy, and the fact that, like, one of the key things that happens is he turns Riley into a vampire as part of this attempt to kind of like spread, and the idea that like even Riley can be forgiven, and even Riley can be saved. And Riley rejects it. And Riley's like, no, this is wrong, and winds up killing himself in this incredibly powerful scene. That's very hard to watch, but also very beautiful and very emotionally evocative. But what I love about that is that when that happens, I feel like that in many ways, that's the decision point for Monsignor Pruitt. That could be the moment where he says, actually, my empathy has to kick in. I think I'm helping people, but I'm doing real harm. I need to pull back. Instead, he's able to go into that place where once you have that truth and everything's justified, you can justify anything that goes against it and just say, oh, that they're heretics, they don't understand. And I think that's when he, like the line you set up, where he no longer is listening to empathy, he's just listening to his quote unquote truth. And that she sees that the woman he loved is like, you're not the person I loved anymore. You've become someone different.
That's true. I also got the sense that like she says some line about how like she didn't want to be with, she made different choices back then. That's not the choices we made. Right. And it's like, she's not really wanting to necessarily be with him, even if it was the old version. Right. And it's like, I don't know. It's so fascinating because it's also about this man. This story is about a man who's like spent his whole life. He kind of had two dreams, and he walked in between them, and he never realized either one. He really wanted to fight to save the town, and he really wanted to have this family, but he had to choose, and he chose to try to fight for the town, and that didn't work. And at this point, it's too late. Like it's also like you very rarely get the story of like whatever, I don't know. He's like 80 or 90 years old. He's an old man. You very rarely get the story of this old man getting to be young again and really getting to see through the eyes of his regrets in a very relatable way. And man, it's just really good. It's really, really good.
And I think one of my favorite parts of it as well is not only does I don't think that the woman who he used to love rejects him necessarily, because she does still wind up like holding him and they're together at the end in a very poignant way. But the other person who really kind of, again, is like, I don't want what you're trying to offer, is the daughter that he had. Mildred. Mildred is the name of the woman he loved, and Dr. Sarah Gunning, who's also the doctor in this town, so she's one of the first people like pulling all these pieces together, is the daughter. And there's this just incredibly evocative moment where, because part of what's established is that if you die having taken the communion recently, you will be reborn as a vampire. Which, if you've played Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness, it's very similar to that, except you just don't have to have all your blood drained first. But and so there's a scene where, at the very end, Bev is the one who's really kind of turned this into, we are the army of God, we will conquer everyone else. Monsignor Pruitt's like, no, this is all wrong, I want to reject this. And his daughter, the doctor, has been also like fighting against this, and Bev shoots her and kills her. Or at least she's dying. And Monsignor Pruitt is horrified by this because this is the whole point. He wanted to have his daughter back. And so he tries to feed her his blood to bring her back to life.
Gosh.
And she, in this incredible visceral moment, she spits the blood out as she's dying. And it's just such a... It's beautiful because it's not like that she hates him. She clearly wants... She's connecting with him and loves that she's figured out who her father was. But she's also so clearly saying, no, I won't choose this path. This is wrong.
Yeah. Man. When he sees... And, like, that's the thing. I think he lets... As we've talked about, he lets his empathy get the better of him. He talks about how he himself has murdered people and how he couldn't resist it and all this stuff. But it was God. God chose those people to die. And, like, that's the line where, like, we never get to really see him do that, which I think gives you the chance to be on his side for most of the story. Mm-hmm. But, like, we know that he also did the thing where he, like, went and blood mad and killed someone.
Right.
And he justified it through his faith, just the way these other people are.
And in many ways, I think that's one of the most powerful metaphors of the whole thing, because I don't think that many of us have, like, we have to kill people for God. Some people certainly think that, but an awful lot of people feel like, well, you know, it sucks that I had to harm this other person, but this was, you know, what God was calling me to do, or just this was what, you know, destiny was calling me to do, or this is what, to advance in my career, it sucks, but think about how much good I can do now that I'm in the CEO position, even though to do that I had to kind of like screw over this other person. Like there's so many ways that we can justify to ourselves the harm that we do to others. And to me, I think you put it so perfectly. That's kind of the central idea of this TV show, is that especially when you think you have proof of that goodness, anything becomes justifiable. And like that's look at any religion, look at any cult, look at like, you know, QAnon today, look at anything, you know, where it's okay to hurt other people because they're not. It's all for the greater good.
Yeah. Ugh. Yep. Sorry. One of the most striking moments for me is when he does walk. He's like, he's realized, he sees the army Bev is creating and what they're doing, and he sees the pain he's caused. Mm-hmm. And he turns around and walks into the church, and he sees his daughter about to burn it down. Yeah. And he's like, it's just a really powerful moment where he just kind of turns on a dime and he's like, okay, I was wrong. This life was bad. I did a bad thing. He turns around, he looks at her and he goes, okay, light it on fire and then go out the back door and head toward the tree line because then they won't see you. Yeah. And she's like, she looks shocked because she thinks he's going to be against her. And then he says, God, I mean, it's real sad to me because she doesn't know he's her father. And she says, that was the plan, like really confused. And then he just like looks at her really with a lot of love in his eyes. He's like, I'm so sorry. I never got to know you. Yeah. And like, she sort of dawns on her what is going on here, that this is her father. And then Bev shoots her. And it's just such a sad moment. Yeah. Oh. And one of the things I love about the way Mike Flanagan tells stories is that he drops in these little details that tell you so much without having to focus on them. You know, the doctor is, among other things, a lesbian, or at least she has a female partner for the entire story, and he knows that. And I think that there's clearly she has a tension towards the church because she feels like, for very understandable reasons, because, you know, what Catholic and not most Christian churches, but I'll say that again, for very understandable reasons, given what the Catholic Church and many other Christian churches teaches about homosexuality, she feels like she's going to be rejected by that. She certainly is by Bev and some of the others. And like, there's a moment earlier where he sees her with her partner and later says like that he's proud of her. And it's just such a nice, and I think all that's tied up to this moment. And you're right. It's so beautiful that he, you know, where the two of them wind up. And of course, then what happens with Bev makes it just, you know, all so much more painful. Well, and it makes me sad to think about that, though, too, because you're talking about this line of like when your belief in something that you can't prove crosses your line of empathy, I think is what I like really what I'm getting at. Because there are like truths that you need to fight for, but like when there's a truth that you literally can't, like whatever, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. Well, especially
so there's this line where he's not willing to let his empathy get the better of him. He's still like fighting, but then when he turns to his own daughter, he does have that empathy for her great enough to like turn on his new faith, his new covenant. And so I don't know, there's something sad about that, because that's a very common thing in stories. It's like and it makes him more of an anti-hero than a villain, because a lot of times there's like characters like Wilson Fisk. Not he's a villain, but you know, he only cares about the people that he loves. Like he has very specific people he loves. It makes him a relatable villain, I guess is what I'm getting at. Not anti-hero is a bad term for it. But you know, you have that, you get these villains and you set them up, and they may not have empathy for anyone outside their circle, but they love their circle. And that matters in storytelling to us, because we see them as at least they have this much empathy, and at least they're going to fight hard for their people.
Yeah. And for him, I think he wants his people to be all people, but it's also that, like, if you reject the truth, you know, and this is, I mean, it's a straight up white savior complex of like, I know how to help you, but if you reject my idea of how to help you, then you're bad, you know? And that's going to lead me to think that for understandable reasons, a lot of people have asked me about this, and so I want to kind of address it, both because it's important as its own thing, but also so relevant to the story. One of the major plot points is there's a young girl in town who is disabled, in part because, as we find out, she was shot by a guy who's the kind of like, he's the town drunk. He's the town, like, he, you know, does stupid things. He was out in the woods with a rifle. He was drunk. He thought he saw a deer. It was actually her. He just shot something else and a ricochet hit her or whatever it is. And she was paralyzed. And one of the first true miracle is that she's able to walk again. And it's this really interesting scene of how he, like, you know, he challenges her. He's like, get out of that chair. You can walk. And everyone else around him is like, what are you doing? You're being so cruel. But then, of course, she can. And I want to talk about this. First, I want to talk about the disability part of it. Then I want to get back to the kind of the main idea here. But this is something a lot of people have asked me about, because one of the things I'm on record as saying is that I don't like stories where you have a disabled character, but they become non-disabled because of the magic or because of the science, and you know, they become a superhero where their disability is basically not, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I think of her character somewhat different, because yes, the miracle makes her able to walk, but she winds up being one of the characters who rejects everything. She is one of the people who, like, is part of that, like, this is all horrible, fights against it. And the very last line of the show is her and someone else out on a raft, so that they're away from all the carnage of the island, another teenager. And the last line is, I can't feel my legs. And it was searing, because it was a, like, the thing that healed her was fundamentally wrong, you know, and she was willing to reject that. She was willing to say, this isn't worth it. Even though she knew at the time that, I don't think she knew that it would undo her healing. And you can hear the pain and some fear in her voice in that very last line. But I just, you know, to me, this is an exception to that rule that I often talk about, because of the way that it's not portrayed as like, oh, it's great that she's healed. It's that, first of all, she gets to have this incredible confrontation with the person who shot her, which is, I mean, we could do a whole other episode on that. But just the way it's portrayed as, yes, she was healed, but in a way that she has real questions about. And most importantly, in a way that she had no agency in. She didn't get to choose it. And when she gets to choose again, she chooses not to. This is probably one of my favorite stories of disability in this kind of media.
Well, and you say there's a lot of sort of fear in that moment when she realizes she can't feel her legs. And yes, that is there. But I think it's also a very hopeful line, because she's gone through this experience, and that blood that is inside of them is like sort of this poison that is morally poisoning the town, and like they don't know how long it takes to get rid of it. They don't know how long it flushes through your system or whatever. And I think in that moment when she says, I can't feel my legs, and then it just cuts to black, it's sad to lose like any function, probably to some degree, but like it's or scary or whatever, but like it is much more preferred to get rid of the moral problems that they've all faced in this moment. I don't know. Like, and it does. It's her choosing, and I think the story choosing that this is a better ending for her, much better ending than like just she's healed, and that's not her journey, you know.
I see. That's the thing is, I think that there's some real possibility of that, but I want to say as someone who, like, you know, I can walk sometimes. I'm not as fully term fully disabled is nonsense. I'm not disabled in the same way that she is, and I am. But I admit there's an awful lot of times where if someone said, hey, you can have a full leg again and not have to ever use the wheelchair, not have to use your prosthetic leg, not go through all the things, but these other bad things will happen. I'm not like, I want to tell you, I'm the ethical panda. I would, of course, never make those decisions. It'd be really hard for me, though. I can understand the temptation. And I think you're right that there is a lot of hope in it. And there is a lot of like, thank God that is over. I do want to push back a bit, though, and say I think it's very intentional that it cuts off there because it leaves so much mystery. Because I think that's the point.
Yeah, totally.
I don't think she ends it in a place of, okay, good, I'm happy being back in my wheelchair. I think part of the point is we're now back to doubt. You know, the whole show has been about the dangers of certainty, and that's great. Right. But the whole point is that there isn't certainty. She's going to now live the rest of her life in a wheelchair, thinking, I'm so glad like vampires didn't take over the world, but also remembering those 3 weeks when she could walk again. And I think that's all kind of mixed up in it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's very interesting that it's mixed up.
Yeah.
And that like, in a way it's a note of, I'm losing the benefits of this nightmare. You know what I mean? Like, this is a horrible nightmare and it's over. And like, this is a sign that the nightmare is over, but I'm also losing the benefits of the nightmare. And so it's like it's a great way to end the story. It really is.
I should also say, I think you and I do such good podcasting together. Both you and I are terrible at remembering names, and we both count on our other hosts to jump in and be like, "Oh, here's the name of that person." So I kept being like, "Wait, why aren't? Oh, right, you're not." So Lisa Scarborough is the name of the girl we're talking about.
That's right.
Her parents are Mr. and Mrs. Scarborough. I'm not gonna look up their names, but they're also important at the moment. Her father is the mayor of the town, and the person who shoots her, who also has this beautiful story, is Joe Colley. And let's talk just for a minute about Joe Colley and Riley, because I know you've got to go very soon.
I do. Because
one of the things that the story is also about is the idea of redemption and the idea of, can you be forgiven for this horrible thing that you've done? And especially, can you ever forgive yourself? Because that's, I think, one of the most, like, again, in that, I think that's my favorite scene in the whole show, when Lisa confronts Joe and she says, listen, I hate you. And I'm going to keep hating you, and I will never stop hating you, but I also forgive you. And I hope you can forgive yourself. And to me, that scene was everything, because it wasn't the like, no, I forgive you, I love you, everything's fine. She acknowledges she's always going to hold on to this awful feeling for this person who did a terrible thing to her. But she also, like, for both him and Riley, the question is, can they forgive themselves? As well as can they be forgiven? Should they be forgiven? What did you think about the way it approached their two stories?
I thought it was beautiful. Like you said, I really don't have a lot to add. It's just absolutely a beautiful, beautiful moment. And the sort of hatred the whole town has for him, and the hatred he has for himself, and the clear like self-destructive behavior he's still engaging in. But he still like he that moment where she forgives him and is just like, you can tell that could have unlocked his potential. You know what I mean? Right. Like that sort of, for both of them, it's freeing them of the sort of like the cycle of regret and hate that they're both locked in from this life-changing event. And that forgiveness frees them both.
Yeah. I mean, and Joe, like Riley, as we said, winds up killing himself. In part, I think it is a final manifestation of his, like, I don't think I should still be here anymore. But also it's because now I'm a vampire and now this is almost so much worse. Joe, he quits drinking. He's on the path to changing his life when he's killed by the vampire, again, because he's trying to figure out the truth. And in many ways, I think that's another one of those real decision points for the pastor, because Joe's the kind of person he's supposed to be helping. You know, he and Riley have helped Joe, and Lisa especially are helping Joe to find a better path. And he has to kill him in order to do everything else he wants to do.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Man, there's so many other things that we could touch on, and I know I've got to go. I do want to just briefly mention there's the Muslim family.
Yeah.
That adds just a lot of complexity to the issue, because you've got a Muslim father who has it just adds a lot of like real world discussion to this thing of the Christians have the vampirism, and now like this Muslim guy is like, no, his son wants to join in because of the benefits that everyone's receiving.
Right. And his name, this is a bit confusing because his name is Ali. As I remember it, his name is Ali Hassan. He's the sheriff. And so Bev, in kind of a like trying to be cute, but clearly being pretty anti-Islamic and racist, calls him Sharif. But then the cast notes on Wikipedia list him as Sharif Hassan. So I'm not sure. I thought his name wasn't Sharif, but I'm not sure now. But yeah, that
is racist as fuck, but it's a good joke.
Well, yeah, but I also don't know. Maybe I got the name wrong. I'm not sure. But I love also you dropping F-bombs on my podcast because you can, but not on yours.
Oh no, we drop them over there. I just bleep them these days.
Yeah, that's fair. But you're right. What'd you like? 'Cause just to fill people in, so he's the sheriff. He came here because he joined the NYPD after 9/11 because he wanted to show, like, look, I'm Muslim, I'm American, I can be a patriotic citizen. But he dealt with so much racism in the NYPD, which, by the way, his story is very much based on a number of true stories that happened.
Yeah.
So he moves to this small town where, of course, he faces incredible racism. And his son wants to start exploring Christianity because that's what all the kids in school are doing.
Well, it's also what, like, he literally sees a girl get her legs back.
Right.
And, like, sees all these miracles happening around town and is like, no, I know we've been saying we have the real truth and they don't, but, like, clearly they do.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like the vampires is like convincing everyone. Man, when that vampire walks in the room in the priest's cloaks, like, that's just so iconic. Like, this show is so clever in combining these two worlds. It's so much fun.
I mean, it's two worlds that have been like, there's so much Catholicism wrapped up in the vampiric stories,
Yeah.
Part of why the whole story gave me chills is, if you know the vampire role-playing game, one of my favorite characters I ever played was a guy named Father Leahy, who was a Catholic priest who believed he'd been made a priest by God, made a vampire by God, in order to bring healing to even the most forgotten and evil creatures. So I was just like, this is my character. I should sue. This is great.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, but give me your last comment on this, and then I'll let you go. So what did you like so much about that story of the Muslim father and son?
Oh, I just enjoyed the, like, complexity of the father, like, dealing with his son wanting to leave the faith. And it's like, for me, this story, as I said, is a lot about when religion crosses empathy, Kind of religion is nothing but a justification tool in this story for most people.
Yeah.
It gets complicated because I don't think that's the case with the father. I don't think that's the case with the priest. I don't think that it's just justifying. It's one of the things that it's doing, but it's almost like this thing has bolstered his belief. But for a lot of people, it's using faith to justify the vampirism and the murder and the bloodlust and all this stuff. Especially with Bev and the people, her sort of disciples, as the story goes on. But I don't know. It's interesting to see the sheriff, like, I don't know, dealing with his faith and just trying to have an earnest faith, dealing with those same doubts. It's almost just like watching one religion in the light of another religion thriving, but for bad reasons. And he's like, I'm just trying to do my thing here. I'm just trying to get my son to bow down with me. And it's just interesting. And
his story, I think, is one that I've heard echoed by so many clergy people who don't want to go that fundamentalist we have proof route, which is when you're offering doubt and when you're saying, look, I know that the questions are hard, we will be with you in the questions and be present with you in the doubt, but we're not going to fix your doubt. And the guy down the road is saying, I will give you the answers. You never ask questions again. Like, you can think you're the more healthy version of religion, but 5 people are going to go there while 1 person comes to you, And I think that's, absolutely, to me, that's exactly what Hassan, by the way, also, don't write angry emails to Wikipedia. This was just my dyslexia or dumb reading. I realize they're listing his name in the titles as Sheriff Hassan. But because for everyone else, they're listing it as first name, last name, I was like, wait, why aren't you giving his first... Why are you saying his first name is Sharif? No, I just read it wrong because Sharif is with an A, not an E. I'm an idiot. Ignore that. Thank you.
That's so funny. Okay, I really do have to go, but let me just say real quick, to end on a light note, why the hell did they not find somewhere to hide? Like, the whole end of the story, just to throw it out there, the whole last 20 minutes of the show is every building in town has been destroyed, has been burned to the ground, and, like, the sun is coming up, and everyone in town is a vampire, they're all or dead, and basically the whole town is just about to burn. Build a lean-to, like, get a hammer and nails, like, get a tarp, something. Yeah. There are ways to survive this, and they have a long time. They have all this time to, like, let's go all have our final moment that sets up our character's death and their decision making, and then, like, they go, some go and sit by the footbridge, some go and do all these little things, and, like, you have time to look for a plank of wood to lie under for 20 hours or whatever.
Yeah, like does nobody have a reinforced basement anywhere in this?
Right,
right. It's one of these things that I think I've been paying attention to a lot, where the writer wants the characters to face a very hard moment. And you love watching the characters face that hard moment, but in the back of your head, you're like, but the writer didn't do a good enough job setting up the hard moment. I totally agree with you on that. Like,
I agree.
I love watching them all basically come to terms with the idea that they're wrong and accepting this. But also, like, it didn't have to be that way.
Yeah,
anyway,
silly.
You need to go, so I'll just give your sign off for you. Matt is he's on MCU Cast. He's all over Bingers Assemble, PandaVision. Check out the MCU Cast. Check out all those podcasts. Check out strandedpanda.com. You can find him on Twitch and all the things. Check out my other podcast, Star Wars Universe Podcast. Check out all the awesome things that myself, Matt Carroll, and all the other Stranded Pandas are doing. And most importantly, have a good day.